Hey folks, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I want to show you 3 quick tips for better mixes. We're going to be going over some quick tips for better mixes today, but before we dive in, if you are ready to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety and really start to hone your workflow as an engineer, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's just a simple PDF that will walk you through the entire mixing process step by step to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without any more of the guesswork and without any more of the hassle. It is a completely free guide, and you can download it below using the link in the video description. Now let's jump in here and go over these 3 quick tips. Tip number 1 for better mixes is to use mix bus compression. So we've got our mix up here, and then on my mix bus here, I have the fat channel from Studio One, and it's running the Brit Comp, which is an SSL mix bus style compressor or SSL bus style compressor. Any one of these will work, or you can always find your own. You can use a stock plugin as well. I used to use the stock compressor inside of Studio One before I got this plugin, kind of upgraded to this one. But any kind of compression, just a little touch of compression on your mix bus, slower attack, medium style release, gentle ratio. So you can see we're at 2-to-1 ratio here. I've got about a dB of makeup gain on it as well. And I never touch this threshold. It's always at negative 1.6, and I mix into this compressor. So it's on there from the get-go as I'm pulling up my tracks. So I push into this compressor, and I'm only doing about a dB, maybe 2 dB of compression, but it helps to tighten up the mix as a whole. I like this compressor because it gives a little bit of thickness in the low end. It gives a little bit of weight to the kick drum, which I like, but any kind of compressor will tighten up your mix a little bit, and it'll glue everything together as you mix through it. So let me play you the mix here, and I will turn on and off this compressor, and you can hear what it does for our mix. I can't take anymore. Makes the song feel more cohesive, makes it feel like a band playing together rather than a bunch of instruments dubbed on top of each other, right? And that's what you want. You want it to feel like a band. You want it to feel like a cohesive song, not just a bunch of tracks stacked on top of each other. That's what mix bus compression will give you. And to glue all of these tracks together, you can see there's a lot of tracks on this song. It's going to glue everything together because it's compressing everything together. So it gives everything a little bit of movement, but together. Hence, gluing everything together, giving everything a little bit of cohesion. That's what mix bus compression is going to do for you. And if you opt for something like an SSL style bus compressor, it'll give you a little bit of thickness on the low end as well. It helps the bass and the kick drum sit together and work together as well, which I like. So that's tip number 1, is to use mix bus compression. So just throw a compressor on your mix bus, whether it's on your main or you're sending everything into a bus. Try a compressor on it. Slower attack, medium release. You can see we're at 30 millisecond attack here, 100 millisecond release, 2-to-1 ratio, and we're only doing about a dB to 2 dB of compression on the entire mix. And then I've got a dB of makeup gain to compensate for that. Tip number 2 for better mixes is to make use of high-pass filters. Now, high-pass filters can be a little bit scary, especially on stuff like kick drum. Oh, we're sending into something random there. So here on the kick drum, you can see I've got my high pass rolled up to about 50 hertz, which seems crazy. And then if we look at our bass guitar, it's rolled up to 74, but we've got a boost there. So you want to make use of high pass filters even on lower frequency based instruments, but especially on things sitting above the low end. So if we take a look at our kick drum here, for example, I'll turn off this high pass filter, and I want you to listen to how things change. It's not a huge difference in the overall sound of the kick drum, but we clean up the low end. We get rid of that ringing and we get rid of all that sub information that we don't need to be so prominent on the kick drum. We're not completely removing it, we're just rolling it off here, but we get some of it back later with our boosts down here. So we're getting rid of it to control our low end and get it tight, and then we can boost anything we need back later. You want to make use of your high pass filters to clean up your mix and keep things nice and tight. So especially on higher frequency based instruments. So if we look at this organ here, right, we don't need anything down here below 100 or even below 200. So we've got this high pass filter rolled up to about 200 hertz. Let's take a look at our organ here. The heart of this sound is up here in the high mid area. We don't need any of this stuff down here at 100, 150 to start building up and to fight with our bass, to fight with our kick drum, and to fight with the low end or the low mid area on our guitars. That's where your low end on your guitars is going to sit, around that 200 area. That's the weight on your guitar. So here on our organ, we don't need all of that. We can roll this up to about, where are we at, 222, to get rid of that and focus in on the heart of the sound, which is the high mid area on this organ. So make use of your high pass filters to get rid of stuff you don't need and focus in on the heart of the sound. So if we look at the acoustic guitars here, right, we're up at 150 or 140 here. We don't need anything below that. We don't need that low octave, that lowest strings ringing at 80 hertz, right? We don't need that in there because that's going to fight with our bass, that's going to fight with our kick drum. We want a tight and focused low end so we can roll this up, and the weight that we want from our acoustic guitars is going to be there around the 200 hertz area. So take a listen here on our acoustic, and I'll take off our high pass filter. Hear how by rolling off all that sub information, everything below 100, below 140, we focus in on the sound of the acoustic guitar that's most important and contributes the most to this track. And there were some palm mutes in there too. Those produce a lot of low end and a lot of sub that push into a microphone. So we don't need any of that coming through, making use of our high pass filter there. Going back in review here, 2 tips so far. 1 is making use of a mix bus compressor to glue all your tracks together. 2 is making use of a high pass filter to clean up the low end and focus in on the heart of each sound in your song. Now, you don't have to go crazy with this, right? If you don't need the high pass filter, you don't need it. But if there's stuff down there that you don't want in your track, that you don't need in your track, roll it off and clean up your low end. Keep your low end focused and keep it tight. Tip number 3 for better mixes is to not mix in isolation, but also not to mix with everything in. Now, when I was coming up, when I was learning how to mix, there were like a whole bunch of different philosophies on how you should mix. A lot of people said, don't mix in solo, mix with everything in. The only thing that matters is how it sounds with everything else in the track. Now, there's some truth to that, right? You're not going to hear any of these tracks in isolation unless there's a track that starts off the song. Like this song starts off with the acoustic guitars, so you hear the acoustics by themselves. So you want to make sure they sound good by themselves. But you're not going to hear the bass by itself. You're not going to hear the drums by themselves. The organ, the vocals aren't by themselves. So there's no sense in mixing them in isolation. That's why you don't want to mix anything in isolation. But it's very much a struggle to mix everything with everything going, right? To try and mix an electric guitar with everything else going, or to try and mix this organ with everything else going. I'm not going to hear all of that mud down in the low end, right? I'm not going to hear everything that's down here around the 100 hertz area that's contributing to low mid buildup on a track. You want to at least take a listen in solo and then click it back into the track and see, okay, this is how it's interacting with everything else, but this is the sound I'm focusing in on. So give your ear a chance to hear what you are listening to. So if you solo your organ, okay, this is what the organ sounds like. then unsolo it, click it back into the track, and let your ear focus in on that organ and hear how it interacts with everything else. Don't mix it in solo, but don't try and mix it with everything else going as well. Same thing goes for your vocal, right? You don't want to try and mix it with everything going, right? That can be quite a struggle, but you want it in there with everything else going. So click your vocal, click it to solo, take a listen to it, see, okay, is too much S going on? Do I need to boost up some air on the vocal? Is there too much low mid buildup? Where's the vocal sitting frequency wise? Then click it back in with everything else and hear how it interacts with everything. If you never listen to anything in solo, you'll never be able to identify where certain sounds are coming from. So for me, my process is I build everything as I go. So I'll start with the drums, I'll mix all the drums together, then I'll add in the bass, mix the drums and bass together, guitars, vocals, and so on. So I realistically mix the drums by themselves as I pull everything up, but then I tweak everything together. So if you want to follow that philosophy, don't mix in isolation, but try not to mix everything all together at the same time. That's a difficult thing to do, especially for me as a beginner. When I was hearing all those people say, leave everything in, it only matters how everything sounds all together, that was a struggle for me to get everything to sound good right from the get-go like that. As you get better, you'll have the ear for that to be able to identify, okay, that's the bass. But you want to, as you're starting out, you want to solo things up as you're working. Okay, this is what the bass sounds like. Then unsolo it and listen to how it interacts with the track. If you're starting out here, if you're trying to get your mixing workflow together, try building things as you go. So mix your drums, then add your bass, then add your guitars, then add your vocal, then add your keys. So as you go, stack things on top of each other. That'll allow you to make room for things as you go, and you can tweak everything as a package at the end. That way you're not mixing in isolation, so you're not ruining a sound because you want it to sound good by itself, but you're also not struggling to mix while everything is going. So those are our 3 tips there for today, our 3 quick tips for better mixes. 1 is to use mix bus compression. 2 is to make use of high-pass filters to clean up your low end, get yourself a tighter mix from the get-go. And 3 is not to mix in isolation, but also not to mix while everything is going. Try building as you go. Drums, then drums and bass, then drums, bass, guitar, and so on and so forth. I hope that was helpful for you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you are ready to take your mixes to the next level and really start dialing in your workflow as an engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and you can download it below to start creating more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you in the next video.